Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all.
Good morning.
For those who don't know us, I am Nayaswami Daiva, and this is Nayaswami Gangamata, and we are delighted to be with you this morning. There's a song I will do you a favor and not sing, but I will read. The lyrics are brilliant. Brother, I have a faint suspicion you and I have been led astray. Taught to drive the devil from us, we've invited him to stay. What we need is light, for we can't drive out the darkness with a stick. No, we can't drive out the devil with a stick. Some proclaim all men are sinners, can't escape the devil's might. How their interest must intrigue him, they won't let him out of sight. What we need is light, for we can't drive out the darkness talking sin. No, we can't drive out the devil talking sin. Some of us were taught the slogan, social evils must be slain. But can anger drive out sorrow? How can passion conquer pain? What we need is light, for we can't drive out the darkness while we hate. No, we can't drive out the devil while we hate. Brother, have you ever wondered why the darkness lingers on? If we want to see the sunrise, let us turn and face the dawn. What we need is light. Yes, we'll only best the darkness when we love. Yes, we'll only best the devil when we love. We are, I don't want to talk so much today about the delusions of the world. They are multifarious, the things that draw our attention, that leave us perpetually holding an empty sack. We all have our own, where most of us here are mature enough in years to have made several or many endeavors toward fulfillments and find ourselves somewhere down the road going, what just happened? But I want to talk a little bit more about the endeavor to find truth, because it's not always as simple as you would think it ought to be. Finding truth, there's a lot of ways that we can get lost in the bypaths of trying to find wholeness. I remember for myself, when I finally realized that the game was rigged, that nothing I could do outwardly was ever going to really work all that well. And I started turning, you start turning toward what? Self-help books. Every day, in every way, I am getting better and better. Right? How's that work for you? Pretty good until you look in the mirror and realize it's just not necessarily true. I tried psychiatry and therapy. And it seems like it would be natural to do so. My dad was a psychiatrist, and so I tried that. And finally, some guy I was seeing said, I'm not sure what's wrong with you. Because I was really hungry for something that he couldn't put in his little box. I didn't just want friends and family and life out here to work, which is what psychiatry and psychology and the social sciences are designed to help you with, is to make this out here work. It's a good thing, but I already knew I could make it work. I just realized that it working at its best was going to be insipid and weak and unfulfilling at best. Where the heck am I going to go? He said, well, you might want to try reading these two things. And then basically he pushed me off the dock and said, good luck, set sail and do what you can. It was Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, I think is the name of it. And the other one was, I believe, Autobiography of a Yogi. Although I went back and saw him a few years later, and he said, I don't think I recommended that book. Somewhere in those years, that book had shown up, and I thought he had kind of, I thought he had foreshadowed the impact and power of that book. But I remember I was hungrily searching for something that I knew would be fulfilling, and I didn't know how to put my finger on it. I knew there had to be a secret to life, and I couldn't find anybody that had it. I'd find people that had little bits of it, and I'd hang out with them until it was clear that they too didn't have the full story. They might have part of it, but they didn't have the full story. And then I'd go looking around. And meanwhile, I was working in restaurants. I was waiting tables and stuff. It was a fabulous way to earn great money with no responsibilities, short hours, and kind of a very superficial life at that level. But I would socialize while I was at work. And I was socializing with people while they were socializing, but then when they were at work, I was off. So it was a brilliant yogic lifestyle because I had all this free time when nobody was pulling on me because everybody was busy with their own things. But I remember in working, they say when the devotee and when the disciple is ready, the guru appears. When you're really hungry enough for truth, truth will come to you. That magnetic pull of your soul will draw a response from the ethers. And I'd read all the good self-help books, and I'd done the Dancing Woolley Masters and the physics books, mystical physics books, and I just still couldn't get deep enough. And I was working at a restaurant in Northern California, waiting tables. And I'd even found the Autobiography of a Yogi by this time, but I still was kind of in the early days of trying to figure it out. And there was this young man who was waiting tables with me. His name was Rick. And Rick was absolutely genius. He was a person like I'd never met before. He was light. He was fresh. He was funny. He was unflappable. He was completely in the moment constantly. And just really quick-witted. And working beside him was always delightful, but a conundrum. I couldn't figure out what was going on with him. And I was always asking, everybody around me about questions about the meaning of life. And finally he said, we got to talking. He had actually lived at Ananda Village for his senior year of high school. And there was only one Ananda at that time. And I hadn't connected the dots. I didn't know about Ananda at all. And he said, he was saying, well, it's based on the teachings of Yogananda, which I had run into. Autobiography of a Yogi is, of course, by Yogananda, for those who might not know. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, and his direct disciple. And I said, well, what's it like? And he said, well, I don't know. With all of your questions, with all the things you're concerned about, I think you might want to live there for some period of time. And I said, yeah, right, like I want to add a cult and a guru to my current list of problems, right? Okay. I recall during this period of time running across sacred teaching, sacred circumstances. In fact, I remember I've told the story, a little bit of this story, I think to some of you. In this period of time, some friends of mine who had introduced me to the Autobiography of a Yogi, they were living in Sacramento, and they said, oh, a direct disciple of Yogananda is coming to town to give a talk. And I was a little dismissive. I said, oh, well, that's nice, so what? They said, well, you seem to be fascinated with his book. Don't you think that somebody who lived with him might not be of very interest to you based on what you think you're interested in? And it hadn't occurred to me that the capacity for somebody to live with somebody else and be that deeply touched by them and transformed by them was a real possibility. And so I said, oh, well, okay. So I went down to Sacramento and I sat in on my first satsang with Swami Kriyananda. And I got there and I was kind of earth-toned. I was trying to solve the world through organics and no wars and get rid of pesticides and herbicides and all that kind of stuff. And so I got there and I was earth-toned and I walked in the door and everybody was in pastels. And it was the time of the lavender ray, I think is what they call it. Everybody walked in. Asha was championing that phase of Ananda's existence. And they were all nicely dressed and just kind of and a little yuppie-ish, it felt like. And then I sat down, they were all singing the same chants. And I just looked around. I'd never been around anything like it at all. So I was already feeling a little out of my water. I don't know if it's familiar to anybody who's new here today, but I can empathize if it's feeling a little odd. And then Swami came out. Now Paramahansa Yogananda is an orange-robed Swami. He's a spiritual master, and he just always is represented in these orange robes and this power radiating off of him. And I was expecting his direct disciple to come out in orange robes and just have the same radiant power. Bookmark. when Swami Kriyananda passed, Jaya, who's been one of the founding members of Ananda for a very long time, spoke of his experience with Swami Kriyananda. He said, when I first met Swami Kriyananda, he said, I was walking up this way, and I saw this man coming this other direction, and I was expecting Swami Kriyananda, and there he was in his orange robes walking down the pathway, and I looked at him, and from the neck down, everything was perfect. But from the top up, from the chin up, he had this beret on. And he said, I knew I was going to like this man because from that moment on. Well, I would have been glad with a beret-topped, orange-robed Swami. What I got instead was a Hawaiian shirt-garbed Swami with this long beard, and he came out, and he was very familiar with almost everybody else there, and he continued to speak of Hawaii for about an hour and a half. And I'm sure he wove in spiritual teachings and the things that he always weaves in. But by the time the Hawaiian shirt had hit me, I was no longer receptive. And I kind of sat in there kind of just bewildered, and I left, and I thought, wow, this is not for me. And I pushed off as hard as I could. I've seen repeatedly in my own life and the lives of others that when we get things that we are not yet ready for, we don't know what to do with them, and we take them and we push them away. And then when they come back, I would then I kept trying to move to Nevada City, which is very close to where Ananda Village is, where Swami Kriyananda and all the things that of this path were happening. And I would go to this little vegetarian restaurant, and I would eat there. And this is back in the early 80s. Vegetarian was fairly rare and stuff. And every time I would check out at this restaurant, it was a cafe, it was a store and restaurant, they would try and hand me a book as a gift. And every single time I said, no thank you. I just really don't want this. Finally, after about the third or fourth time, because it was a drive for me, I finally just took it so I could say I had one already. And I took it home and I stuck it on a shelf. Well, in the meantime, I had this Swami Kriyananda experience, and so I'd kind of written all this off. And one day I was in this existential funk. I was just pacing around the house, and I just needed something to take my mind off of this funk I was in. I grabbed a book off the shelf, and it happened to be that book. That book was The Path, the autobiography of Swami Kriyananda. Right? And I grabbed it, and I started reading, and I just didn't care what I was reading. I just started reading. And I went, oh, my God. Holy smokes. So that's who this guy is. I couldn't put the book down. I couldn't put the book down. I called them. Literally, around the clock I was reading, I called them the next morning and said, I don't know who you are. I don't know what you're doing. I don't know where you are, but can I come? And I went up there, and something broke through. But probably, had I not had, I don't know, these are complex things. Had I not had the battle with these things, I might have been a lot more receptive. Had I not had the Hawaiian shirt experience, I might have been more receptive. Had I not had people talking at me about the thought of doing it before I was ready, it might have been an easier pathway. I remember I see people constantly. In fact, we're in an interesting circumstance where somebody who has an awful lot of knowledge but not much practice is actually using the very teachings that they have knowledge of very dismissively, and really is almost as Christ said, lest they trample them under their feet and turn around and rend you. A conversation was up with this friend of mine, this person, and we were talking, and they're really under stress at this point, but they were talking about using the spiritual teachings as a tool in meditation, and they just looked at me and said, I'm not interested in your God stuff, and they just took all of the sacredness of those practices and of those things and just threw them on the ground, just stomped on them and turned around and just went into attack mode. I wonder how long it's going to be before this person is receptive. Because what do the masters bring? What is it that we're actually talking about that Christ brought, that Yogananda and these masters brought, that Kriyananda brought? It's the one thing we're looking for. It's the access to the only thing that will ever satisfy. It's the silver bullet for all of life's problems. But if we are still committed to the world enough and to making the world work enough, we won't really do something with those teachings. We'll kind of hold them off on the side. We'll think we know something about them because we know the words. We'll think we know something about them because we have, we sat for 5 minutes in meditation. Oh man, I went really deep. We think we've got something. But when the tests of the world come, we don't have the power drawn through those things that give us a different experience of life. And so we're still at the mercy of the surface of life. And when the fates take an unfriendly interest, we've been talking about this the last few weeks, but when the fates take an unfriendly interest in you, or in your family, or in your friends, or in your job, or in your reality, it can be vivid. The power of Maya is profound. It's remarkable. And it can strip us of everything we think is meaningful in a heartbeat. And if we don't have real experience of spirit from inside, if we have taken those powerful teachings and been dismissive or careless with them, we've got no place to stand, and we've got no place to turn. The Bhagavad Gita tells us the qualities that are necessary. I wanted to just read briefly from the 18th chapter of the Gita because it talks about what it takes for us to actually go through this process. Yogananda used to talk about, there's a lot of yogis who talk about being dismissive of this world, of Maya, and of human love and of people and things around you. And that's an approach, and it's okay. If you can't do anything else and you don't have another way to work, that's okay. Because ultimately that's true, but it's only one approach. Yogananda talked about going so deep in what's here, going so deep in human love that you never lose somebody through the changes of life and death. Going into the Maya, going into the story, going into this life, but with the tools of yoga, so that you find in the midst of everything the stillness that's at the heart of everything. Because there's no point where God does not equally exist. Think about that. There is no point. Look in the mirror of your life. Think about the things that plague you as a problem. Guess what's right in the middle of it? God's light. Think about all the things that you delight in and hang on to. What's right in the middle of it? Equally, God's light. There's no place where it's different. But if we don't use the tools to cut through the surface illusions, we never find that truth. And it's cute, and it's nifty, and it's fun when it's easy. But when the fates take an unfriendly interest, if we don't have the power of real communion, if we don't know for a fact the experience of spirit and stillness, all the words, all the books, all the knowledge is nothing. This is kind of starting in the middle of the last part of Krishna's dissertation with the disciple. Krishna represents the Lord, and the Guru is giving the disciple understanding about how it really works, how life really works. That's all this book is about, is a discussion between the Guru and the disciple, the Lord and us. And Krishna is saying, one attains perfection by offering his own special gifts up to the Lord, out of whom all beings were manifest, and by whom the whole universe is permeated. It is better to fail attempting to follow one's own dharma than to succeed in following the dharma of another. One incurs no sin in trying to fulfill one's own duty. It's better to be true to who we really are and to do the things that are ours to do. O Arjuna, one should not abandon the work dictated by his own nature, even though that work contains some imperfection. For all undertakings, even the best, are marred by blemishes, even as a flame is obscured by smoke. That person comes closest to attaining perfection who keeps his intellect non-attached to everything outside the self, who reigns in victory over the self, and from whom all desires have fled. absorbed in complete purity of intellect, subjugating the body and senses by resolute self-restraint, protecting oneself as much as possible from noise and from other sense entanglements, relinquishing both attachment and repugnance. Abiding in a solitary place, eating lightly, controlling the body, speech, and mind, as absorbing oneself in divine yoga meditation, dispassionate, serene, self-surrendered, relinquishing any lingering attachment to power, vanity, lust, anger, possessions, and the consciousness of me and mine. Such a person qualifies to become one with Brahman. One attains supreme devotion to me and can be absorbed in Brahman, who is always inwardly calm, who never laments, and is without desire, and beholds all beings with equal mind. By supreme devotion to me, he can quickly realize me in my true nature, who and what I am. Knowing these truths, he can unhesitatingly enter into me. Over and above the faithful performance of all of one's duties, and taking shelter in me, he must still be received by my grace. Ergo the purification service that we do weekly. We have to open to that grace. We have to open to that movement of consciousness and enter into it. Mentally, devote your every action to me. See me as your supreme goal. Just through the course of days, just offer everything up to light, everything up to goodness, everything up to the stillness. That's all. It's not a form. This is about the light and the stillness and the wholeness and the love that's at the center of the universe. With your heart absorbed in that, in me, you shall by grace overcome every impediment. If, however, with any lingering thought of ego, you do not fully heed me, you may be thrown down again. So if indulging your ego, you should determine, and he's speaking to Arjuna, who's decided that Arjuna's decided, I just don't think I want to do the things that I'm supposed to do. He's in rebellion against light, against God's guidance to him, the divine guidance to him. And so his guru, Krishna, the Lord, is trying to help him understand that it's by the performance of these things that he'll get everything that he's been seeking in his inwardly. If indulging your ego, you should determine, I will not fight. You would have to fight anyway, obliged to do so by nature, your own as well as cosmic. In other words, you can't avoid who you are and what's coming. That momentary delusion, the ripened fruit of past karma, which has now made you reluctant to fight, will be snatched from you by another good karma, and you will find that you have no choice but to fight anyway. The Lord is lodged in the hearts of all beings. His cosmic delusion compels them to revolve as though they'd been mounted on a machine. O Arjuna, make the Lord alone, with all the eagerness of your heart, your refuge. By his grace you will attain the utmost peace and find shelter for all eternity. Thus has wisdom, the most secret and sacred of all secrets, been given to you by me. Reflect on it, then do as you feel to do. Again, hear now my supreme word, the most secret of all. Because you are dearly beloved of me, I offer it now for your highest benefit. Absorb yourself in me. Be wholly devoted to me. Worship and bow to me alone. So shall you undoubtedly reach me. This I promise you faithfully, for you are dear to me. Forsaking all other lesser dharmas or duties, remember me alone. I will free you from all sin, from all past karmas. Do not grieve. Never share these truths with one who is without self-control or devotion, nor with one who won't share with others in a spirit of service, nor give them to one who is indifferent to them or who finds fault with me. And then he says, whosoever will with supreme devotion impart this supreme secret knowledge to my devotees, those who are really reaching for truth. You shall without a doubt come to me. No one among men performs a more priceless service to me, nor is there in all the world anyone more dear to me. So even though we're warned against not giving these things out, wantonly or heedlessly or in places where they're not well received, where the soil isn't fertile, the most sacred and powerful thing we can do is to experience these truths, to reach into them, have a direct experience, and then to go out and share them with others vibrationally, just as that man did so many years ago as a waiter. He didn't preach at me. He didn't tell me all the teachings. He didn't tell me how great it would be. He just said, you might want to go there sometime. But by his nature, he intrigued me. By his I remembered when I moved there, I realized that it was because of Ananda, his experience there, that freshness of spirit, that wholeness, that constancy, that lightness had been born in him, had been released in him. It's what I see in all people who have given themselves over and lived inside of the teachings of Ananda and practiced them deeply enough that they become alive. Concentration, one great saint noticed, concentration is not constantly holding the mind in one place. You can't do it. The mind is a constantly moving thing. Concentration is the power and practice of constantly returning the mind to the same point of reference. Moment by moment, returning it again and again and again and again and again and again to the same point of reference. If we fill our minds and our hearts with thoughts of peace, with thoughts of the divine presence, with thoughts of wholeness and freedom and joy, the world will do what the world is so good at doing. Maya will do what it's so good at doing. It will say, oh, I can't get your attention with this, let me try something else. And if you continue to hold, if you get involved in that thing, off you go on another adventure, right? And before long, somewhere down the way, you kind of wonder where the heck you are and how you got there, and you wonder what happened. Simple, you just rode the wave out. But if you hold on, if you hong saw, a mantra, a japa, a constant recitation, the remembrance, a do hong saw meditation, but whatever you can do to hold the consciousness and power of God repeatedly, then that thing will just slide by, and the next thing will show up, and it'll slide by, and the next thing will show up, and pretty soon you discover that it's just a passing show, and in the middle of it is always that same stillness, always that same stillness, always that same joy, always that same power. Concentration is the secret. Cultivating devotion allows that concentration to yield something. So let's take this prayer before practicing concentration, into a brief moment of silence. Teach me, O Spirit, by meditation, to stop the storm of breath, the skipping of my mental restlessness, and all the sensory disturbances that rage on the lake of my mind. Let the magic wand of my intuition halt the gale of passions and unnecessary desires. Let the magic wand of my intuition halt the gale of passions and unnecessary desires. In the rippleless lake of my mind, then, let me behold the undistorted reflection of the moon of my soul, glistening ever with the reflected light of thy presence. Of music.